This is Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Right is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here.
Ho, ho, ho. That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there. We're looking at 10-5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
Hello, podcast listeners, and welcome back to part 2 of our look back on what was an amazing summer of sailboat racing at the 37th America's Cup in Barcelona. As I hope you've already heard in part 1, in this edition, we're talking to 2 team members from each of the teams from the Cup match. 2 teams themselves playing their own special part in modern America's Cup history. For INEOS Britannia, Ben Ainslie's team were the first British team to make the Cup match since 1964. That makes them the first British team to make it through a Challenger Series for the Cup match. They were also the first British team to win 2 Cup matches since Sir Thomas Sopwith's beautiful J-Class Endeavour back in 1934. And for Grant Dalton's Team New Zealand, well, they became the first ever modern era America's Cup team to win 3 consecutive Cups. Not since the 1930s and that wonderful J-Class era did Harold Vanderbilt successfully defend the Cup 3 times in a row. In the magnificent Enterprise, Rainbow and lastly Ranger. 3 consecutive Cup wins for a team then defending for the then constantly successful New York Yacht Club. So AC37, very definitely a Cup of historical significance. Before we pick things up in Barcelona, if you're enjoying the podcast, then do head over and show your support at buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. It's very easy to use, and your help allows us to stay ad-free and to keep on delivering these uninterrupted stories. So a huge thanks for the coffees. It really does make a difference. You'll have heard here in episode 1 that I caught up with INEOS Britannia's Dylan Fletcher and Nathan Outteridge from Emirates Team New Zealand. So in this edition, we go back to the Challenger and talk to the sailor that sat at the back of the starboard side of the British boat, before heading back to the Defender to talk to America's Cup super coach, the talented Ray Davies.
A lot of the races are won and lost by a few hundred metres here and there, and that distance you can really claw back in some small gains in manoeuvres.
Yeah, well, I think it would have snowballed pretty quickly for them if they'd won a couple of early races. So it was incredibly important for us that we turned up on day 1 with a strong performance.
The pre-starts have got feistier and feistier over the last couple of months, but fortunately we've had no contact, which has been good. But that one was probably as close as we'll get.
I think we had an edge in pretty much all conditions, but not enough of an edge that we could just rely on that.
Sailing in his 3rd America's Cup campaign, Bleddyn Mon is a real talent. An aeronautical engineer, a one-time Volvo Ocean Race sailor, Bleddyn was foil trimmer on INEOS Britannia in a configuration that saw him sitting behind the 2 cyclers on the starboard side. When the boat was on port, he'd be head out, full concentration, eyes on the right height of the lured foil. The onboard cameras show just how full-on the concentration is. There's very little chat coming from Bleddyn or his portside trimmer Lee McMillan. But before we hear from Bleddyn, here's a quick snippet off the boat from an onboard manoeuvre.
We've got 15 till boundary.
And by?
Yep, nice
Trap.
turn.
Yeah. Okay, turning here and board down.
2, 1, made.
Turning.
Very well. 2, 1, and board.
All about the foil here, no problem with them.
Bleddyn Mon, welcome to the podcast. It's been an exhausting few months, hasn't it, for all of us? How are you? You must be fried.
Yeah, I mean it was incredibly intense the last couple of months. I think we'd never really appreciated how long it could be at the beginning. You think back now to the end of August when the preliminary regatta started. It feels like an age ago. And then, yeah, obviously progressing through each round, like all the milestones going past, and then obviously to get to the Cup eventually at the end. It's a real marathon for the whole team, and yeah, obviously amazing to have got that far, and it was a massive effort. But yeah, for sure we're exhausted now.
I mean, it's a bit early, isn't it? But how pleased are the team with what you achieved here in Barcelona?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like when the cup ends like that, you're obviously gutted not to come away with the eventual win. But I'm sure in a few days, maybe a few weeks' time, when we look back at it, we'll be very proud of what we've achieved. Yeah, you live in this little bubble day in, day out, kind of chipping away, trying to make the boat faster every single day. And I think we did a great job of that, and that's something that we can be really proud of as a team. And yeah, unfortunately, wasn't quite enough at the end. But yeah, I think we'll all look back at this and be proud to have been part of this team and have some great memories.
This is your third cup, isn't it? I mean, did you feel like this was just one more, or was there a feeling for you that this could be special? I mean, the team were in a quick boat and that you were all ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, when we launched RB3, we were confident that it could be a quick boat, and it was really a case of us of unlocking that potential. And I think that's what we said from the outset of launching the boat, was that we needed to make sure that we learn our boat faster than any of the other teams here in Barcelona were going to learn theirs. And I think that's always the challenge in the America's Cup. It's always about kind of continuing to learn throughout. Once you've started racing, still learning. And I think we were, as I say, I think we were confident in Britannia as a boat. And I think it felt like to me that there was a lot of momentum behind the team with the partnership with Mercedes and the experience we've now got from the last 10 years of campaigning. There was a lot of momentum and a good feel around this campaign. And it was nice to be able to show that to the world and get to the cup match itself.
I remember speaking to Freddie Carr, and he said, you know, it felt like you had to tame the beast. I mean, how did you know that you had a fast boat before you'd even lined up with anyone? How did you know that? Yeah,
I think we had a lot of confidence from the modelling side. There was a good process in place for developing the boat in computer simulation before we'd actually launched it physically. And I think you get a lot of confidence from that. You get a lot of confidence from seeing kind of the performance being eked out, not necessarily on the water, but just that every week the boat in the model is getting faster and faster. So there's a lot of confidence you get from that side. And then, as I say, once then the boat was in the water, for sure we had some challenges along the way in the first few months of launching the boat and sailing the boat. But as I say, then we were able to kind of unlock the potential over the last few months and really put the boat through its paces.
We'll talk a bit more about that a little later. But I want to talk to you a bit about Ben Ainslie, your third campaign with Ben. What's that like? I mean, having Ben as the leader and also racing, you know, on the race course with Ben Ainslie.
Yeah, I mean, I think now having sailed with him for 10 years, he's definitely one of the most driven people that I've ever sailed with before in my life. Kind of to run this campaign, I guess to kind of be spearheading it, motivating us as a sailing team and also the wider team is incredibly impressive. And yeah, I don't think there's many skippers like him out there. And yeah, we saw his skill throughout the Louis Vuitton series and then into the cup match as well. But yeah, extremely motivational and very driven. I think that's how I describe him.
How's he changed in the decade you've been with him?
Yeah, I mean, I first started sailing with him in Extreme 40 actually, when he finished up in San Francisco. And I guess that was the first time that he'd had his own team. And yeah, for sure there was, he could be fiery at times, kind of really just passionate and excited about the racing. And I think now, I mean, the team has just grown and grown around him, really. So where we are now, him being able to run an organisation this big, motivate everybody from the shore crew to the design team to everybody that's supporting us, and then being out there on the water and being ultimately extremely focused and being able to deliver out there in these boats is incredibly impressive.
All right, we've been very lucky throughout this cup. We can hear everything off the yacht in amazing quality. What's that been like for you guys on the yacht? I mean, it's literally like people listening in on your conversations. How aware are you of that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess whilst you're racing, you're kind of just saying what needs to be said for the situations you're in. But yeah, obviously everything's being picked up on, both by kind of supporters and fans, but also other teams as well. So I guess you're most mindful about trying not to give too much away to your competitors, particularly between races. You never know who might be listening. But yeah, I think once you're racing, you're really focused about making sure you're just giving the right information at the right time for the guys on the boat. But yeah, I mean, it's been interesting listening to the other teams as well. So yeah, it works both ways.
And certainly, if you're a budding tactician, it's been fantastic, isn't it? You know, hearing them painting the pictures and all the decision making, it's been so good. One of the big questions is who does what on the yacht during racing. I mean, can you talk about that all now? I mean, you sit on the starboard side and usually behind the cyclers, and we can see you when the board's on starboard, head out, you know, like out the car window, looking at the foils. What were you up to during racing? How did it work?
Yeah, so every team obviously had a slightly different playbook and how they sailed their boats, and a lot of those decisions were made 18 months ago now when the boats were being designed. And yeah, for ourselves, our boat was almost split in half, where Lee and I would essentially transfer roles depending on what tack we were on. But yeah, predominantly kind of focused around flying the boat. So our kind of rearward spot allowed us to have kind of a nice forward vision, especially on the wavier days, seeing the kind of the oncoming sea state. And just trying to fly the foil on the boat as accurately as possible through the waves, and then also helping out on the trimming side. So obviously there's still plenty to do on the trimming of the sails on these boats, and we were kind of active in that as well.
Yeah,
bit of a coy response to that.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, we talked a lot in the broadcast about how you kind of, you only boat where the foil trimmer, the pilot, was actually physically looking at the foil the whole time. How much of a benefit was that compared to just watching it on the screen? Yeah,
I mean, for sure there'll be some interesting stuff for us to look at over the next few months, and seeing how other teams were kind of tackling the problem as well. I mean, yeah, for us, having that forward vision and seeing what was coming, as I say, particularly when the tricky conditions were hard, I think was advantageous for us. But yeah, I mean, equally very impressive to see how some of the other teams were able to fly their boats as accurately as they were without that vision. So for sure there'll be some digging in the next few months to try and understand what everybody else has been up to.
Let's talk about the early racing in the preliminary regatta. The team lost to the Americans, the Italians and the Kiwis. I mean, how much learning was going on during that preliminary regatta? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, the preliminary regatta was tough for us as a team. I guess that was our putting initial foot forward there to see kind of where you were stacking up in the pecking order, and obviously it wasn't where we wanted to be at that point. But there was a heck of a lot of learning going on in that regatta and the weeks kind of either side of it. And I think that's really what kind of laid the path in a way for us going into the rest of the Challenger series. But yeah, it was interesting because at that time we hadn't done any official racing with the other challengers. So you never really knew where you are. You maybe knew where perhaps teams had their strengths and weaknesses, but until the racing really mattered, it was hard to properly pinpoint it. So yeah, for us, there was a lot of learning to be had there, both getting the most out of our performance and also looking at other teams and seeing how they stacked up and what we could learn from them. And I think that's really what led into the improvements that we saw in the coming months.
Who did look strongest on early form? Who did the team think looked, the toughest to beat?
Yeah, I mean, I think out of the challengers, when everybody rocked up here earlier in the year, it was it was quite interesting to see where each team was at. I think Luna Rossa came out the blocks firing, I'd say, when they arrived here in Barcelona, and certainly kind of a tough opponent to try and beat. But then equally, all the other teams had great moments. The French had a great boat and were really improving quite fast. And Alinghi and American Magic all had their moments as well. So it's one of those ones somebody can be looking really good one week, and then the progression of another team comes through, and suddenly they're not the top dog anymore. So yeah, you keep an eye on them, but you have to just keep chipping away at your own boat and making sure that you do make the improvements.
Onto the round robins, and the team was starting to win races. I mean, everyone talks about making improvements, the big gains. What were those from your role? I mean, you're also part of the data analysis team. What was being improved on the yachts, other than, of course, the team's comms and racecraft?
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of chipping away throughout the last few months, really, trying to understand our boat better and looking at other teams and seeing how they were manoeuvring their boat and trimming their boat around the racecourse. And I think, some of the big gains came from how we were handling our boat, to be honest. Like you add up the number of tacks and jibes, and suddenly you end up with a lot of meters that you can potentially gain. And a lot of the races are won and lost by a few hundred meters here and there, and that distance you can really claw back in some small gains in manoeuvres and straight line performance. So a big part for us was in the manoeuvres. We spent a lot of time looking at tacks endlessly every single day, trying to eke out a little bit more. It's been good fun. It's relentless, but it's good fun, and you'd end up kind of at the end of it dreaming about it. But I think that's what it was, eking away at those gains that kind of led to more and more race wins, and the momentum of the entire team. Kind of you get the results in the water, and everybody's heads are up high, and the guys on the shop floor then happy enough, kind of working on the boat all night, and it's kind of compounding.
When you say make gains, I mean, it's obviously things that we can see, the timings, trimming, angles. But what about the things we can't see? What contributed to that improvement, perhaps in areas that weren't visible to the viewer? Yeah,
I mean, there's obviously, as you say, there's the choreography that you can almost observe from off the yacht, but underneath the hood on these boats, there's an incredibly complex kind of boat system, and that's something that we're always developing in the background, kind of out of sight. And I think we had a good foundation of that when we launched the boat, and it was in a position where we could keep tweaking, keep refining. I guess we were seeing elements of automation perhaps from other teams and how they were performing manoeuvres, and there was something there we could learn from to get consistency. I think that's what we learned as well, was that we did have good tacks at the beginning of the series, but it was getting the consistency that you knew you could achieve, that the boat could achieve those distance losses, but not every time. And I think where we got to with kind of some changes on the systems and also in technique was that we were consistently able to achieve those kind of high performing tacks.
Yeah, they were impressive in the end. What do you mean by automation? How did that factor in?
Yeah, I mean, the control systems in these boats and the way the rule was written kind of allowed an element of automation in the systems, and I think that was something that we'd always had in the back of our mind. But the challenge with it is that if you don't necessarily understand what you need to automate at the beginning, you could quite easily get down the wrong path. And I think where we were was we'd managed to get to a point where manually we were able to achieve the manoeuvres and good manoeuvres. And at that point, then we could have a good steer on how we would automate it. And I think, as I say, that was kind of for the consistency element. I think that's where we did make some good gains.
Well, the team won the round robin. How big a deal was that? How did the team react to that?
Yeah, I mean, there was a kind of an interesting sequence of events, I guess, that led to us winning that in the end. and with having the sail off with Luna Rossa, it was a very strange sequence of events. And I think at the time we felt the momentum was behind us, and that we had a good chance there against Luna Rossa to win that final race. And ultimately that led to us then being able to choose who we were up against in the semi-final. But yeah, the team was over the moon with that result. As I say, in a big team like this, kind of momentum and goes a long way. And I think that happened for us in the coming weeks, then leading up into the semis. But yeah, I mean, it was a massive result for the team to have kind of got to the top of the pecking order, I guess, at that point. And yeah, we were chuffed.
INEOS chose, I think, Red Bull Racing. From a data perspective, what facts are looked at to make that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, going into the round robin or midway through the round robin, we weren't necessarily expecting to have that decision. So it was a nice position to be in, coming out the other side of it. But yeah, you're looking at obviously the other teams in terms of performance-wise, where do they stack up? Obviously, your aim is to get through to the final at that point. So you're looking at how they pre-start, where their strengths are, and you're kind of also trying to stack up how quickly you feel your level of improvement is, to make sure that whoever comes out of the other semi-final is also, you're able to beat them as well. So yeah, it was a tricky decision deciding which of the three we would take. But yeah, Alinghi gave us a good battle, and I think kind of battle hardened us a little bit for the final against Luna Rossa.
How nervous were you in those pre-starts? As we got into the elimination round, it was all about keeping on the foils in those light winds, wasn't it? And that's your responsibility. How nervous were you? What was the tension like?
Yeah, I mean, the pre-starts, I think throughout this Cup have been kind of escalating, I guess, in terms of levels of excitement. And the light wind ones in particular are really challenging. These boats in the light, they generate a lot of dirty wind, and it just accumulates around the pre-start as the boats start reaching around, and it's a massive challenge just getting off the line in good shape. So yeah, you've got to keep the boat on its toes, and especially when there was some sea state. We had a few where it was light and there was quite big waves. But I think, again, we felt like that was an area of strength of ours. I think we had a great understanding of the pre-start in terms of strategically what we wanted to do. And a lot of that is credit to the work that was done with Ian Williams. He came along for this campaign and really was able to kind of map out our pre-start strategies quite nicely. So yeah, it was a good battle there with Alinghi to get through to the final with Luna Rossa. But yeah, all the pre-starts this campaign have been pretty exciting.
Ian Williams, isn't he? 6 times match racing world champion. He's basically the professor of match racing, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's got a PhD in it.
He's so good, and he's very invested into it, and perfect guy to have around.
As you say, you took on Luna Rossa in the final, one apiece, day after day for 4 days. I mean, the deadlock was tantalising, wasn't it? And tough to break. How much of a sense was there in the team that you did have the upper hand and that you could get the job done?
Yeah, I mean, those initial race days with Luna Rossa, kind of coming in day after day with it still being kind of going one apiece each day, were pretty intense. And you knew that it was only a small bit that you needed to be able to break the deadlock. Yeah, it was a tough battle. That was a really tough battle for us. And yeah, I think the excitement within the team, we got the break, again, led to another kind of little bit of momentum that we felt, right, we can do this now, we can finish this off. But yeah, that was an incredible part of this competition for sure.
Yeah. Can you remember that day, October the 2nd, got 2 in a row? How did that feel in here in INEOS Britannia? Yeah,
that was a special day. I mean, to get the 2 wins against Luna Rossa, we at that point, having had race apart for the previous days, it was super special for us as a team, and I think it was that point that we felt, right, we can do this and we can get through to the cup match.
looking at the footage, we see you full of concentration all the time, like you're not even breathing, Bleddyn. I mean, how did you feel after the Louis Vuitton Cup? How exhausting was it for you? Looking at 30 to 40-minute races, 2 a day. I mean, how much concentration was there involved?
Yeah, I mean, the intensity of that period was insane. I mean, the concentration while sailing the boat is next level. But then it's just the grind that every day that you're constantly thinking about, like, how can we improve more? Like, what's the next step? And I think it's that level of intensity that you get at this stage of the America's Cup, where you know that every little bit matters. So everybody in the entire team is just chipping away, and you can only sustain it for so long. But you know there's an end. So you know there's an end at some point. So yeah, I mean, it was quite the battle, that one, and I think we all came out of that battle within Rosso quite tired.
How much of a sense of history did you feel? 60 years since Great Britain had been in the Cup match. I mean, you were a part of it. How was that for you, Bleddyn?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I actually didn't realise that until kind of had an interview at the mixer, and I think it may have been with yourself. And I was told that, it was 60 years since we'd been in the Cup match, which was pretty special. I mean, I think we're in such a small bubble here that a lot of that stuff kind of goes by. You don't necessarily realise the history of what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a great achievement for the team. Something we can definitely be proud of, taking away from Barcelona. And yeah, something that the effort over the last 3 years has kind of been really worthwhile.
There wasn't much time to ponder that, was there, and recover? A week went by and you were straight into a battle with the Kiwis. I mean, did you think that they were beatable?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we were unsure about where they were at. Obviously hadn't raced them since, I think it was end of August, beginning of September. And there was always that level of uncertainty as to where they were at, both in performance and what they would do in the pre-start and tactically. At that point, we obviously we knew exactly what Luna Rossa's plays were and what they were up to. But when we got to the Cup match, that was kind of all up in the air and anything could happen. But we knew that they were obviously going to be a strong team, and they'd been pushing hard whilst we were out racing against all the challenges. They'd been pushing hard, training and developing, and like their program hadn't stopped. So it was going to be a tough battle. But I think we had a belief within the team that we'd come this far and there was nothing stopping us going any further.
How close were the boats? I mean, from the team's analysis, how close were they?
Yeah, I think from our analysis, we were definitely in the game. They maybe had kind of slight edges in some areas, and as I say, it doesn't need much in these boats, especially on some of the days that we had. I think we saw that both boats were, when they got ahead, they could keep the other boat behind, and I think that was the thing. It was, you just need to have that little break to be able to get ahead of the other boat. And for sure, their boat is very quick. And yeah, whether we go for another 7 races now, what would happen, we don't know. But we felt we were constantly learning. So we felt like we still had gains to come. Unfortunately, ran out of time.
What do you think gave them the edge?
I mean, I think as a defender, they had a head start from the beginning, I guess. They obviously were ahead when we finished up in Auckland, having won there. And all the other teams were trying to kind of close that gap. And I think we did a really good job of closing up as far as we did. And we're back 2 years or so ago when we kind of started the campaign again, and we had an idea of what the deficit was that we needed to make up. And it was a big number, and it was always a bit of a guess in a way as to where they may get to. But I guess we were quite close in terms of what we thought that number would be, and just not quite close enough. But I think from where we are now, having got all the way through to the final, I think we're in a great position to be able to go forward from.
talk to us about that one pre-start moment. I mean, obviously you were on the blind side, so may not have known just how close it was. I mean, what did you think when you saw the footage of it?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, I was on the starboard side at the time, so had no idea how close we actually were. And Dylan was relatively relaxed about the situation. So when we saw the footage afterwards and saw how close it was, yeah, I mean, you don't really want to see these boats much closer than that. And I think, yeah, I mean, the pre-starts have got feistier and feistier over the last couple of months. But fortunately, we've had no contact, which has been good. But that one was probably as close as we'll get.
It made our day in commentary, that's for sure. You won races too. I mean, that day you won 2 races on the bounce. I mean, how good was it knowing that they could be beaten?
Yeah, I mean that was a massive day for us to be able to just have that chip out of them there. The conditions were, I think we'd say the conditions were in our favour. It was kind of light, but it was wavy, challenging conditions. And yeah, the first race, obviously, we got them off the foil in the pre-start, and it wasn't over then. We had to obviously keep ourselves on the foil. It was one of those races where you didn't have to do much to make a mistake, and that would be your race over. But we executed that one, and then it was nice then the second race to have a proper tussle. I think it was probably one of the closest races of the Cup. And for that race to be able to keep them behind us, that was, I think, very encouraging for us as a team to be able to say, yeah, we can beat these guys fair and square out there.
Bleddyn Mon, America's Cup match winner. Sum it up. What's the last 3 months been like here in Barcelona?
Yeah, I mean, it's been intense. It's been incredibly intense. And the Cup, when it finishes like this, is always brutal. The way it ends, and that's it. It's over. But it's been a great team to be part of. We've been learning fast, which is what we said from the outset that we wanted to do. And I think we can be proud of that, and we can be proud of what we've achieved. And we'll come back stronger next time.
Thanks, Bleddyn. Thank you for your time, and all the very best.
Thank you so much.
Bleddyn Mon, a real talent with a lot of foiling America's Cup experience. Our last guest is a coach who is also a multiple America's Cup winner himself, a permanent fixture at Emirates Team New Zealand since 2003. Ray was instrumental in helping push the performance parameters of the sport as the foiling era took hold, and now heads up the very talented coaching setup at Team New Zealand. Before we hear from Ray, let's just grab a quick reminder of what it sounds like to win the America's Cup for the 3rd consecutive time.
2, 1, board.
Here in Barcelona, we are witnessing Emirates Team New Zealand deliver a Mediterranean masterclass. They are about to become the first team in modern history to lift the trophy 3 times in a row. And Emirates Team New Zealand win the Louis Vuitton 37th America's Cup.
Hi Ray, welcome to the podcast, and many thanks for joining us. It's been a few days now, and things have quietened down a little bit. I mean, how are the team feeling after that win?
Yeah, it has been a few days. It's quietened down a lot. It's unbelievable, the difference after the Cup, with the unknown, a week before, to now be in a position where we've won it. Really with the unknown of exactly how things are going to play out. But just so thrilled and happy as a team. We're all so excited to have pulled that off. It's a huge undertaking, and I think added by the fact that we took on so many other aspects of the campaign and the event and the hydrogen boats and the youth and women. So there's plenty of reasons why we could have lost it, and so it's a huge relief to have won it with all the add-ons as well.
Yeah, it is odd for the defender, isn't it? Because it's 100 miles an hour, and then it stops and everything's been packed up in boxes.
Yeah, it's a huge amount. The number of people involved, obviously, in our America's Cup team, but also the event and then the volunteers. So at times early on, like the Villanova, the first event, we're very connected to the event and trying to make it work. And we had some great meetings at the end of that, how we just really had to try to separate ourselves from the event side of it. So come the Cup, it was incredible. You know, it was a slick, well-oiled machine from the event side, and we just got the notices like everyone else off the WhatsApp and just played along with the game.
I mean, how big a deal is this? I mean, everyone was playing down the 3 consecutive wins, but that's 2017, 2021 and 2024 for this team. I mean, put that in perspective. How massive an achievement is it?
Oh, it's huge. It's absolutely massive. Like, to back it up, it's so easy for a team to fail after a victory. To keep the poachers at bay so we can keep a strong team. That's incredibly difficult. And then to reinvent ourselves to make sure we're better than the time before. And without a question, this is the strongest Team New Zealand I've ever been involved in. And I've been with 6 New Zealand America's Cup teams now. And it just means a huge amount. Obviously, the early days, there's a couple of losses there. And then to have won in Bermuda was a huge relief to have finally broken the back of it and put the ghosts of San Francisco behind us. So then to defend in Auckland was so satisfying. And then it would have been easy to drop our shoulders at that point. But then to have done 3 in a row with the pressure of the other teams all learning, you know, that class, the AC37, had evolved to a point that it became a real sailor's race. We weren't necessarily going to have a speed edge. So we knew we had to really step up as a sailing team, and huge amount of effort, you know, across all aspects of the campaign. But, the sailing team did a fantastic job of understanding where we had to be super strong and work really hard to get better in those areas.
And Ben Ainslie said in the broadcast, didn't they, that he thought this team was the best America's Cup team ever. I mean, it was a huge compliment, but he actually just said what everybody was thinking. It was faultless.
That's amazing to get that sort of accolade from Ben, who's seen them all, and there's been some amazing Cup teams in the past.
Let's talk about racing. And before we get into it, let's quickly discuss the crane incident. That probably does feel like months ago during the preliminary regatta. Tell us, I mean, what actually happened?
Oh, we were so lucky. Like, you know, people might have thought we were talking it up a little bit. But, well, there was a power cut, and basically the safety systems failed on the crane, and the brakes, it dropped itself. It dropped. And, okay, it wasn't a free fall. It was a bit of a controlled drop, but nonetheless, it was about a 6-metre plummet. And that could have happened. It wasn't the fact that it was just sitting there. That power cut could have happened at any stage in that last hour while the boat's getting lifted. It could have happened halfway out of the water. But remarkably lucky it was actually somewhat positioned over the cradle when it fell out of the sky.
I mean, that could have been...
Oh, that was potentially the campaign right there. And when the word got out that the boat's dropped, obviously, you know, everyone's scrambling to the forecourt to see it. But the fact that the front splash of the cradle was not all the way up, it was part the way down. So when the boat landed on that, it was bowed down and lower than it would normally be. And luckily, the position the foils were in, they actually were out in dock mode, or out a bit further than dock mode. So the boat actually landed flat on the foils, and they shared the load of it hitting the ground. Luckily, all the instrumentation was still turned on, so we could read all the strains throughout the boat and understand exactly what strains went through those foil arms that were pinned against the asphalt ground. And we could ascertain that, look, there's no higher load than what you've seen on the water. Okay, sand or the scratches off them, but they're going to be just fine. And as it turned out, the hole in the boat was, well, it's carbon, you cut it out and fix it. So the shore crew sprung into action there, and they love that sort of carry on.
Oh, I mean, this team is famous, isn't it, for their attention to detail. I mean, you think of everything. There are just some things that you can't legislate for. I mean, how do you try and cancel out all of those potential banana skins?
Oh, there's so many. Like, literally, like you talk about a banana skin, you could literally sail over a banana skin with your rudder And that's enough to lose you a race, because that would cause the rudder to cavitate and spin out in a manoeuvre. Like we had that with plastic bags that you didn't even know it was on there. We went through a testing day and we kept losing the rudder, and we were trying to figure it out. And are we loading the mainsail too much in manoeuvres? And we were analysing it and talking about it all day long wasn't until we looked at the footage later, thinking there must be a problem with the shape of the rudder. We must have hit something, but then we saw there'd been a plastic bag on there all day. And that's literally not a big bag either. That literally something like a banana skin could literally make you lose a race. So it's never over till the end.
Let's go back to the preliminary regattas. The first time you got to see the challengers for real, what were your initial thoughts on who looked the most dangerous?
I think out of the blocks, I think American Magic were looking pretty slick, and just you sort of know the people in the team, and you know how Terry operates. You know, he just very racing focused, and they turned up. They were in a very strong position, but then very, very quickly we realised that this is all on. You just make a mistake and you're out the back. So it's almost not as dependent on how good the other teams are. It's who can make the least mistakes, and that first mistake in a race is it's really hard to come back from. So suddenly, there's obviously a very, very clear focus for all of the teams on just being consistent and reliable. And boat speed is always going to win it at the end of the day, but it's very easy to lose a race.
I mean, how close were all the teams? It's tricky to get a line on some of that. I mean, the Americans beat the British, the French and the Swiss won races. How difficult is it for the performance team to keep on top of who's in potential good shape?
I think it's a bit of a gauge, but I think, you can just see this, like any regatta you turn up to, you can kind of tell the teams that have got it together just by how efficient they are getting off the dock and everything calm, the mainsail going up smoothly and the right jib, and they're into it, an efficient build up to a race. And, some teams stand out with just ticking those simple boxes and not missing out on key moments, and then that sort of sets a standard. I think even just before race one, you can tell which teams are going to be sharp, and that it does matter for anyone listening to this podcast. It's the same at every level. This your preparation and process leading up to racing. Unless you get that right, next thing you are on the back foot, and then you make that fatal first mistake. That now it's suddenly a really hard race.
During racing, Ray, we talked to you on the chase boat as part of the coverage. Just explain what your role on the chase boat is during racing.
During racing, leading up to the racing, we obviously work close with the weather team, primarily clouds, and obviously we get all the wind off the marks and the lead up and predict wind as a joint weather program for all of the teams. We set up extra weather stations, so we know the facts, we know what the wind is doing, we know the tendencies and the trends of the wind, and then you need your meteorologist to tell you what's going to happen. So there's a lot of chat around the weather and then choosing the sails for the expected conditions. So that's one of my primary roles. Then also sort of managing the build up to the racing, what we do in our blocks, and if the blocks have changed because we haven't been out of sailing, just trying to keep it efficient and coordinated so we tick off our goals. The practice starts we were doing before racing was really, really important for us. It gave us a real good understanding of the timings we're trying to achieve. It might look like a pretty sort of standard pre-start, and obviously sometimes they got a bit dynamic, but there's a whole lot of timings to try and put the pressure on the other boat to make a difficult decision. If they're going to jump us and lead back, it had to be a challenging time for them. So it's sort of the thing with match racing. You're always just trying to force the other boat to make a difficult manoeuvre. So, there's all strategies around that. I work super close, and they stepped up. They were absolutely awesome to work with, Josh Jr. and Sam Meach on the coaching side of things. Josh was always going to be the backup sailor. So the chances of someone getting injured on these boats, or even injured to a degree that they couldn't sail, was very, very slim. So there's no point having him just sitting on the sidelines. And he he was amazing, stepping up and really helping coaching. And then Sam Meach started off as a cyclor, but at the end of the day, we got some massive units in the team, and he was never going to be able to compete as a frontline cyclor, but he obviously had the stamina and the ability to be a cyclor, but not in the A team. So with his sailing skills, he was a huge benefit, and just, he's an amazing coach. He's got amazing empathy with the guys. He's very, very good at communicating and talking and keeping notes and coming to conclusions. So, so working with those two guys on the lead up to the racing was really important.
I mean, Ray, you're a pretty handy match racer yourself. I mean, is it true you were sort of racing the guys with a ghost boat or in the rib?
We had the ability to do that. We had people ashore that could do that, so that was pretty cool. It's amazing where the sailing's got to, where you can put that sort of pressure on a boat, and who knows where it's going to go in the future, but that's just one aspect. And we were able to get the youth guys involved in racing as part of the build up to the final stage of the America's Cup in a virtual sense against the real boat. So amazing.
Yeah, it's very cool. I mean, you have, during the racing, you have to some degree the bigger picture, don't you? I mean, you can watch the broadcast whilst you're in the rib, but you don't talk to the yacht. How frustrating can that be?
Oh, no, it's not frustrating at all. It's quite nice to leave them to their own devices. There's so many times during a race where you could give advice to, you see things, you would sail GPs obviously like that, and you can, you actually feel like you're on board the boat. Whereas, here it's all cuts off at 3 minutes to go. But there's, there is a lot of input you can give in that final few minutes before they cast off. You can present a lot of facts, like I was saying before, of what has been happening on the side of the course and the trends. But you really have to be able to, if it presents itself, like we had in one of the races where, the big right shift that came through, that was very evident that was coming with high degree of confidence. It wasn't just the top marks going right, it was the super yacht that was in the marina on predict wind that had gone right 5 minutes before it got to the course, and it stayed right the whole time, that I had confidence that this is a persistent right shift. So then we could really get that message across to the guys that, we're really confident this is a proper big right. He has not reached the bottom of the course yet. This is, you need the timing to work out. It's like 1 in 20 races where you can actually give a significant bit of advice like that. So it was quite nice to see that opportunity present itself.
Yeah, race-winning information. Let's talk a bit about your sailing team. And the talent is quite amazing, isn't it? I mean, to win races and operate at the level they do race after race, how good is this sailing team?
It's a phenomenal sailing team, but it's obviously a lot more than just their sailing skills. Like we had to, and they developed a boat that in the end of the day was relatively easy to sail, because they'd put the hours and hours and hours into the systems and the way they could change modes on the boat very, very easily. So when they're actually racing, they could literally race with their head out the window looking around, and the steering of the boat became, the easy part of it. They didn't have to sort of focus on all the numbers. That was quite intuitive. So a huge, unbelievable amount of work to get to the boat to that level. But then once it was at that stage, then they're going, well, this is it's all a yacht race now. Let's just have our head out of the boat and have some conversations about what's happening in the future, which is obviously so important in sailing. And, the debriefs have been amazing. Like it's a breeze to coach that sort of talent, because, the ideas are coming from them all the time, and, just you're facilitating really, and you're presenting the facts, and they can clearly see when they've made a mistake or how they could have communicated things better. So, it's really just a lot of it was just sort of facilitating the discussions.
During the Louis Vuitton Cup, I mean, there was a big period, wasn't there, where you're not racing. What were you doing while the challengers were going through the semi-finals and the final?
Yeah, we wound ourselves into a bit of a frenzy during that time. We changed our foils. We'd had quite a significant foil development program through that period. And work on the rudders as well. So the appendages had a huge birthday. A lot of work on fairings and actually cockpit layouts even were changing. But we definitely used that time to analyse the races we had done and where we were strong and where we needed to improve on. So, the way the pre-start developed in the America's Cup was fascinating, because as teams got better at their boat handling, that just meant they could dominate the pre-start. And you could see teams that were, and we felt we pushed that really, really hard in the AC40s back in New Zealand, throwing them around. And we always knew it was going to be a match race scenario. And you could see the challengers eventually get more and more confident, understand how slow they could sail the boat without dropping off the foils, how much speed they needed to do a double tack, etc., how sharp they could turn the boat. And, I think we saw a pretty clear case with Prada. Were probably not so confident in what they could do with their boat, and really hamstrung them in what they chose to do with their aggression in the pre-start. They sort of went for some very conservative options, but so that was one of the things that we could see was evolving. So during that period between the Louis Vuitton and the Cup, we could go, okay, where's this heading? Yep, we know it's going to be tough. Let's just keep working on the difficult manoeuvres and get comfortable in that.
Who did you think was going to win from the Challenger Series? And did you have a preference of who you wanted to face?
Early on, I didn't think it was going to be INEOS. They had a remarkable sort of gain in performance, like everyone's been saying. That was impressive. Early on, I kind of thought American Magic were going to be a bit stronger, but obviously they were losing Goody. That was a huge impact. And then I actually thought Luna Rossa were going to be the challenger. They worked incredibly hard. They had a very fast boat, solid crew, but I think they just had a bit of bad luck with breakages that would have knocked their confidence. They'd obviously decided they had a weakness with the manoeuvrability, and they were a bit on the back foot, so they just didn't quite have their boat configured. And Jimmy and Keiko just sort of didn't seem to have the confidence to really throw their boat around, which normally would have been one of their strengths, to really have a go. So I was expecting Luna Rossa to have been the challenger, but as that Louis Vuitton final played out, it was windy, there's breakages, and INEOS just sailed well. And what a great thing for the Cup that it's come down to the sailors that are winning the racing. Everyone strives for a fast boat, but we're finally seeing races won easily by the best sailing team, not just this little speed edge.
Yeah, I mean, it was great for the broadcast also, with excitement and drama every day, didn't we? I mean, so obviously you were going to face INEOS Britannia in the final. I mean, what did you think about the British team, and how big an advantage did they have, having gone through all that real points match racing to get to the match?
Yeah, well, I think it would have snowballed pretty quickly for them if they'd won a couple of early races, because that just would have doubled down on that momentum. So it was incredibly important for us that we turned up on day one with a strong performance. So, otherwise, a bit of doubt can creep in. But starting off with, and we did by far, we didn't sail perfectly by any stretch, but to come away with 4 wins was a huge boost for the team. So much so that we could afford to lose 2 races and not have the wheels fall off. Had it have been 2-2 or that extra pressure, it's amazing what difference that makes to a team. So they made us have to excel, and that's what you see with a lot of elite top sports people, is they sail better under pressure, and that's what I'm sort of most proud about this team. We seem to sail better when it really matters.
How close do you think the 2 yachts were? I mean, it's hard to know for sure, isn't it, until that race 1 of the Cup?
I think we had an edge in pretty much all conditions, but not enough of an edge that we could just rely on that. We had to turn up. We had to get the best start. We had to not let them go. We had to cover. And you saw that in our racing style. We were giving up leads and doing the extra manoeuvre to sort of shut the race down. We had a lot of confidence in our manoeuvres, so I think we had an edge manoeuvring. But no, we always felt like any opportunity we had to jump on it, like in the pre-start where we went back and had a go in the dial downs and had a go whenever the English gave us that opportunity. Like that was our mentality. We couldn't just assume we're going to sail away and win this thing.
Let's talk about the pre-starts. I mean, how vital were those to win them?
Well, as it turned out, incredibly vital. Even just a small advantage, be it in boat speed, would translate to control after the first tack. So, you didn't have to necessarily be first over the line, but you had to control the side of the course that was favoured, obviously. And that final slingshot and approach to the line ended up being such an important part of the race. Everything could be looking pretty even. You're both going for it, but whoever could execute that, sheet their sails on well, time it, transition the heel and the cant, and do all the little small details better than the other, it would just convert to control, and that's all important in match racing. So the pre-start was critical. The amount of gas and dirty air off these boats is phenomenal. So then it forces the other boat with a boundary just coming up. You can get compromised pretty quickly.
INEOS Britannia had that day, didn't they? Really won 2 races. What was the debrief like that night?
Well, we certainly lost 2 races that day as well. we gave those away. That was terrible. One of those races. When we entered late, like fundamental, basic 101 of match racing, and then you look back at how we. If you look back and see how we approached that pre-start, okay, we entered late, but we also gassed the line on our approach before our manoeuvre. And we look back and we go, sure, we thought we'd learnt that a couple of years ago, but we'd felt there was enough wind that wasn't going to be a factor in that start. And next thing, the wind had dropped a little bit, and now there's a concern about pulling off a manoeuvre, and we didn't quite have ourselves positioned before the final tack on the boundary to enter. So then we entered slow. We had a bit of a second guess whether we were going to actually cross them. We put our board down for the cross, and then INEOS turned up behind us. And it's so easy in hindsight. You look at it, and we could have pulled out of the jibe. We could have dipped the line and turned up. Hindsight's an easy thing, and you don't want to be that person. But we elected to jibe, and obviously fell off the foils. INEOS did a great job of just casting dirty air all over us a couple more times, even though they started the race 35 seconds late. Didn't matter. They just put more gas over us, and we're a mile and a half behind before we got going. So that was us really losing that race before we even entered. That's when we lost that and made a couple of bad decisions. And then the next race they did a fantastic job in the pre-start and had control of us, and we were on the back foot, and they sailed really, really well. We closed up during the race, but just not enough, and that showed. Even with potentially a little speed edge is not enough if you're behind and the other boat's making smart decisions and not engaging or sending us the wrong way. So full credit. We couldn't afford to not sail well. We had to turn up. So you obviously made the event a little bit more exciting.
I love the way you remember every detail of every race. Right?
Yeah, well, it's remember it about 2 a.m. in the morning as well.
The team were faultless from there, weren't they? They didn't give an inch to the British. And this team represents New Zealand, obviously, but the nation expects, doesn't it? And there were tens of thousands of Kiwis here. How was that racing with so many fans here in Barcelona and sort of the weight of expectation of a nation?
It was absolutely remarkable. and it's hard to describe to the people that weren't here, but we felt like we were sailing in Auckland. The amount of black shirts around there, the send-off every day with Ngāti Whātua Aoraki was inspiring. It really was. Day one, we had a karakia in the gym, so that's basically a get together, and we all formed a circle, and that was actually really powerful and quite emotional. And then to have the sort of send off we had every day, it was such a difference from the Challenger series from when we were sailing, just a month earlier. To have everyone rock up, and a lot of expats turning up from all around Europe, knowing the event's on, jumping on the quick EasyJet flight, and getting involved. It meant a lot. It was very, very special, and we knew we had the nation behind us. Obviously, there's always going to be a lot of people upset that the regatta was not in Auckland, as a lot of us were upset we couldn't make that happen either. But we really felt like, honestly, hand on heart, that we were doing an incredible job of showcasing New Zealand on the main stage up here.
How proud are you, Ray, of what this team achieved?
Incredibly proud. Sure, it's been a lifetime of 25 years in the Cup for me, and it is. You put your life into it. The family is living it, as with all of the teams, but it's all encompassing. It's draining at times. It's a long road at times. But to get to the end of it, the difference between winning and losing at the end of the day is, we've been on the other side of it, and it's horrible. And the next thing, you're in a team of about 8 people sitting around a table going, okay, now what do we do? Whereas now we're in a position to be, thinking about straight away, how can we make this better? How can we take the initiatives like the women's and youth? How can we've created a pathway. Where does that path go? Now the decision, we've got a crystal clear yellow brick road. Where's it going to go now? How do we take that to somewhere that's going to be sustainable? So those sort of aspects of the next America's Cup are incredibly exciting. And that's what we're super proud of. We've definitely, a lot of us have had a go at these sort of pathways in the past. And it's a funny old word to use, but there's a path, but now it has to go somewhere. It's not just about the path. That's easy, but we're at the moment, it's kind of still a dead end. The path has to go somewhere. So that feels like that's the next goal of the team.
Ray Davies, 3 times America's Cup winner. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. It's a pleasure.
Ray Davies, rounding off our look back at the 37th America's Cup. To Ray, Bleddyn and Dylan and Nathan, a massive thanks for their time. After weeks and weeks under the spotlight, it was very generous of them all. I must just mention also, towards the end of Ray's chat, we hear a short clip of Ngāti Whātua paddling out the specially built waka or canoe as they accompanied Team New Zealand out of the marina. It was quite the spectacle, an amazing story too. It was very special to have them in Barcelona. So that's it. The 37th America's Cup is in the history books. Another win for Team New Zealand, another big step forward in sailing technology and performance. Who knows where we're heading next? The British Royal Yacht Squadron are the official challenger of record, and we're excitedly waiting for any news of how the landscape may look as AC38 takes shape. Until then, if you're enjoying what you hear, do support the podcast. Buy us a coffee. It's easy to do at buymeacoffee.com/sailing podcast. Helping us bring you these uninterrupted ad-free chats from the leading lights in the sport of sailing. Before we go, a big thanks to Tim at Vertigo Films, whose tireless work and enthusiasm makes these podcasts possible. Tim's just off the back of months and months in Barcelona, so deserves a well-earned rest from all things America's Cup. Please keep in touch via social media. I'm Shirley Sail on Instagram and Twitter, and Shirley Robertson on Facebook. That's all from us for this month. Thank you so much for listening. Have fun on the water and sail safe, everyone.
This is Castle 1. Castle 1. Race officer speaking.
Lane line is on boundary up ahead, 35 seconds out.
A bit lower and faster here. Lower and faster here.
That's a good one, Jimmy.
Still gaining on the lane line there. Gaining on the lane line. We're looking at 10-5, 42. Matching him on the boundary, yeah. Copy.
This is Castle 1 standing by. Out.